Welcome back, dear listener, to The World Asleep. Tonight we find ourselves beneath a sky thick with stars, glimmering faintly, as ancient and eternal as the myths that have shaped our understanding of the world. Beneath this celestial tapestry, the lands of Greece once echoed with the voices of gods, heroes, and monsters. Tales of unimaginable power and profound consequences. Stories that have travelled through time to touch our lives today. From the shores where the sea crashes with unyielding force to the towering mountains, where the gods once dwelled in their grandeur, the myths of ancient Greece continue to stir the air like the whispers of a long-forgotten dream. It is here, in this timeless landscape, that the stories we're about to explore were born. Stories not just of gods and monsters, but of human desires, frailties, and triumphs that still resonate within us all. Tonight, we embark on a journey through the hearts of these myths, 5 tales that have woven themselves into the fabric of history, each one a reflection of power, love, betrayal, and fate, speaks to the core of the human spirit. From the fires of Troy to the soaring ambition of Icarus, these legends illuminate the timeless truths of human nature. As we unlock the stories of these ancient figures, I invite you to relax and let your mind drift through the corridors of time. If these quiet journeys through the past bring you peace, perhaps consider liking and subscribing. Wherever you are tonight, whether beneath these ancient stars or far from the myths of Greece, I'm grateful to have you with us as we journey together into the world of the gods. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The Trojan War. The beginning of the conflict. The wind stirs the earth beneath the shadow of the great city of Troy, where ancient stones weathered by time and war still stand tall against the horizon. The walls of Troy, once the pride of a proud and mighty civilization, rise like giants, guardians of secrets buried deep within the heart of the city. But tonight, those secrets are stirring. Faint whispers carried on the cool evening breeze, the murmur of events long ago set in motion, events that have shaped the course of history, not just for Troy, but for all of Greece and the world beyond. This is where the Trojan War begins, beneath a sky where gods look down, and mere mortals are swept into the currents of fate. For it was in the halls of the gods that this war was born, where vanity and pride took root and began to spread like poison, infecting all who came into contact with it. It begins with a simple act, a seemingly innocuous gesture that sparks a chain of events no one, not even the gods, could have foreseen. The golden apple. It was Eris, the goddess of discord, who cast the golden apple into the midst of the divine gathering. She, who thrived on chaos and conflict, had not been invited to the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, and so, in her bitterness, she sought to sow discord among the guests. The apple, with its engraving to the fairest, was her gift, an offering to stir the gods into battle. It was a challenge they could not resist, and soon 3 powerful goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, were at odds, each claiming the apple as her own. They called upon the judgment of Paris, the young Trojan prince, to choose which goddess would be deemed the fairest. Paris, who had no interest in the squabbles of the gods, found himself standing at the heart of a divine conflict, a man caught between the mighty forces of love, wisdom, and power. He was asked to choose between the 3 most beautiful goddesses in the world, and in their eyes their beauty was not just skin deep, it was power, influence, and the essence of what it meant to be divine. Each goddess offered him a gift that would change his life forever. Hera, the queen of the gods, promised Paris power beyond measure, the chance to rule over kingdoms, to be the master of men, to have dominion over all that lay before him. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, offered him unparalleled knowledge and victory in battle, the ability to lead armies to glory and emerge victorious in any conflict. But it was Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, who offered Paris the most irresistible gift: Helen, the most beautiful mortal woman in the world. Paris, drawn to the allure of Aphrodite's promise, accepted her offer, awarding her the golden apple and, in doing so, ignited a war that would engulf the Mediterranean and change the course of history forever. Helen, already married to Menelaus, the king of Sparta, was stolen away by Paris, and thus began the legendary conflict known as the Trojan War. It is tempting to view the beginning of the Trojan War through the lens of desire and jealousy, to see it as a story of the gods' capriciousness and the mortal follies that follow. But there is something far deeper at play here. The Trojan War is not simply a conflict between two cities, or a contest of strength and strategy. It is a reflection of the darker aspects of human nature, the vanity, the pride, the arrogance that can drive even the gods themselves to folly. In choosing Helen, Paris unwittingly ignited a fire that would consume not only the city of Troy, but also the hearts of men and gods alike. The gods, so accustomed to manipulating the lives of mortals, found themselves caught in their own webs, unable to escape the consequences of their actions. The war began with a simple choice, but it grew into something much greater, a mirror to the flaws and passions that shape human history. It is a story of how pride, ambition, and desire can corrupt even the most powerful of beings, and how those forces, once set in motion, can spiral out of control, leading to destruction and ruin. In the ancient world, the gods were believed to be all-powerful, yet even they were not immune to the consequences of their own desires. Hera's desire for power, Athena's desire for victory, and Aphrodite's desire for love all converged in Paris's judgment, setting the stage for a conflict that would rage for 10 long years. As the ships of the Greeks sailed toward Troy, their sails filled with the winds of destiny, the gods above watched with divided hearts. Some of them, like Athena and Hera, supported the Greeks, others, like Aphrodite, stood with the Trojans. But it was not just the gods who were caught up in this divine struggle. Mortals too, driven by their own desires and ambitions, would play their part in the coming conflict. Among the Greeks, there was one man whose name would become synonymous with cunning and strategy: Odysseus, king of Ithaca. It is he who would devise the plan that would ultimately bring down the mighty city of Troy, but his journey, one marked by trials, deception, and the whims of the gods, would be far from easy. His story is one of perseverance, wit, and the desire to return home, a theme that will resonate through the ages. But before we turn to Odysseus, we must first look at the battle itself, the bloodshed, and the valour that would define the Trojan War. The war that began with a stolen woman soon became a battle for honour, for pride, and for the future of both the Greeks and the Trojans. The Greeks, spurred on by their desire to reclaim Helen and punish the Trojans for their audacity, laid siege to Troy. For 10 years the city stood strong, its walls seemingly impregnable, its warriors fearless. But as the years dragged on, the Greeks grew weary, their once unshakable resolve starting to fray at the edges. The gods too grew restless, their interference often blurring the lines between fate and free will. It is here, in the midst of this 10-year struggle, that the true nature of the Trojan War begins to reveal itself. The gods, who had once played such an active role in the lives of mortals, were now entangled in their own struggles, unable to predict the outcome of their divine manipulations. The war was no longer just a battle of men, but a war fought in the heavens themselves, a cosmic struggle that would leave the world forever changed. Yet, despite the gods' best efforts, it was the Greeks who would find a way to break the stalemate. In the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, the Greeks resorted to a trick, one of the most famous and cunning plans in military history. With the Trojan walls standing firm and the Trojans refusing to surrender, the Greeks devised a plan to enter the city without the use of force, the Trojan horse. The plan was simple. The Greeks would build a massive wooden horse, hollowed out to hold a small group of soldiers. They would leave the horse at the gates of Troy as a supposed gift to the gods, a symbol of their departure from the war. The Trojans, believing the horse was a token of goodwill and a sign that the gods favoured them, brought it into the city with great fanfare. That night, as the Trojans slept, the Greek soldiers emerged from the horse and opened the gates to allow the Greek army to enter the city. The fall of Troy was swift and brutal, a tragic end to a war that had been fought for so long. The Trojan horse remains one of the most enduring symbols of warfare, strategy, and deception. It is a tale of how even the greatest of cities, those built on pride, honour, and strength, can be brought low by their own hubris and the cunning of their enemies. The Trojan horse symbolises the vulnerability of even the mightiest when they're blinded by their own pride and false hope. It speaks to the power of strategy and the art of deception, showing that sometimes the greatest victories are won not with swords and shields, but with wit and cunning. As Troy fell, the city's once proud walls crumbled, and the people inside were left to face the consequences of their actions. The gods, too, could not escape the destruction they had set in motion. The war that began with the judgment of Paris had come to its tragic conclusion, and the city of Troy, once the jewel of the ancient world, was no more. But from the ashes of Troy, one man would rise, a hero whose journey would take him across the seas and beyond the bounds of the known world. This is where the story of Odysseus begins, the hero of the Odyssey, a man whose cleverness and determination would guide him through the trials of gods, monsters, and the forces of fate. What awaits Odysseus in the aftermath of Troy? What challenges will he face as he attempts to return to his home, his family, and the island of Ithaca? We will follow him through the stormy seas and the treacherous lands. But before we set sail with him, let us reflect on the war that started it all. The Trojan War, a conflict that has shaped not only the history of Greece and Troy, but also the very essence of myth and human nature itself. Chapter 2. The Trojan War, the Fall of Troy. The winds had howled across the Aegean Sea for 10 long years. The Greeks, steadfast and determined, had laid siege to the great city of Troy, and the Trojans, their pride unshaken, had withstood every assault. Yet, as the years wore on, the once mighty warriors of Troy began to feel the weight of the siege, an endless cycle of battle and uncertainty. The Greek fleet, though vast, had grown weary. The Trojan walls, though formidable, had begun to seem like an insurmountable obstacle. But in the shadows, behind the walls and under the cover of darkness, a cunning plan was unfolding, one that would bring Troy to its knees, the Trojan horse, a weapon not of steel but of wit and deception. The Greeks, unable to breach the walls of Troy through force alone, had devised a scheme as brilliant as it was treacherous. And it was this trickery that would, in the end, deliver the fatal blow to the city that had stood proud for so long. The legend of the Trojan horse would become one of the most famous tales of subterfuge in all of history, a story of how the mightiest cities can be brought low, not by force of arms, but by the subtlety of cunning. As the war dragged on and no end seemed in sight, the Greek leaders, Achilles, Agamemnon, and Odysseus, knew that their armies could not fight forever. The Greeks had tried everything. They had besieged the city, launched countless attacks, and even sent their greatest warriors into battle, but still the Trojans stood firm. But Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, a man known for his cleverness as much as his strength, had an idea that would change the course of the war. It was a plan that would require not just strength, but patience, deception, and the willingness to gamble everything on a single stroke of brilliance. The Greeks constructed a giant wooden horse, hollowed out to hold a small group of their finest soldiers. This massive structure would serve as the centerpiece of their final act. The plan was simple. The Greeks would leave the horse outside the gates of Troy, pretending to have given up their siege and sailed away. As a supposed offering to the gods, they would leave behind this gift, a symbol of peace, a token of goodwill. The Trojans, their pride and hope high after years of siege, would see this as a sign that the gods had favoured them, and they would bring the horse into the heart of their city. Little did they know, hidden inside the hollow belly of the horse were Greek soldiers, poised to strike at the very heart of Troy. On that fateful night, as the Trojans celebrated their supposed victory and the departure of the Greeks, they failed to notice the subtle deceit. The horse, brought into the city as a symbol of peace, was left in the middle of the city square. As the Trojans slept, the Greek soldiers, hidden inside, emerged from the horse's hollow depths. They opened the gates of Troy to the waiting Greek army, and from the darkened streets the Greeks surged in, pouring into the city with the ferocity of a storm. The Trojan forces, caught by surprise, had no chance to respond. The city that had stood for 10 long years was now at the mercy of the invaders. The fall of Troy was swift and brutal. The streets once filled with the sounds of life were now consumed by the cries of war. The great walls of Troy, which had held firm against countless assaults, now fell to a force much harder to fight: deception. It was not strength, but cunning, that brought the city to its knees. And as the Greek forces poured through the gates, Troy's once proud citizens found themselves helpless in the face of the unstoppable tide of fate. The Trojan horse remains one of the most iconic symbols of military deception, blending psychological warfare with military strategy. It was a masterstroke, one that defied the expectations of both the Trojans and the Greeks. It was a trick that turned the tide of war not by force, but by turning the Trojans' greatest strength, their pride, into their greatest weakness. The Trojans, blinded by their own hubris, believed that they had finally triumphed over their enemies. In their moment of supposed victory, they had been undone. As the Greek soldiers poured into Troy, the city fell into chaos. The once proud warriors of Troy, who had stood firm for so long against the siege, were now caught in the grip of the very thing they had once mocked: the Greeks' cunning and ability to outwit them. The Trojan horse had been their undoing, a symbol not just of the Greeks' cleverness, but of the vulnerability of even the greatest cities. Pride had led them to trust the horse, to believe in the idea that the Greeks would leave them in peace. But peace, like the gods themselves, was a fickle thing, and the Trojans had paid the ultimate price for their misplaced trust. The sack of Troy was as violent as it was tragic. The city that had once been a centre of power, wealth, and culture was now reduced to rubble, its treasures plundered, its people enslaved, and its heroes slain. The great King Priam, who had once ruled over Troy with strength and wisdom, was murdered before the very walls of his palace. The fate of his children was no better. His sons were killed, his daughters taken as captives, and the once proud royal family was destroyed. Troy, once a beacon of civilization, was no more. But even in the ashes of the fallen city, the legacy of Troy lived on. The fall of Troy marked the end of an era, but it also gave birth to another, a legacy carried by those who survived. The gods, too, could not escape the consequences of their actions. Aphrodite, who had guided Paris's hand in awarding the golden apple, saw her beloved Troy brought to ruin. But even as the city burned, the gods watched with ambivalence. For in their own way, the gods were as much a part of the destruction of Troy as the Greeks themselves. the Trojan War was not just a battle between men, but a clash between the divine and the mortal, and in the end, both sides were left to pay the price for their pride. The fall of Troy is a story of the dangers of pride and the consequences of deception. It is a reminder that no city, no matter how great, is invincible. Even the mightiest empires can be undone by their own flaws, be it hubris, greed, or the desire for power. The Trojan horse serves as a symbol of the fragility of human ambition, showing that even in our greatest moments of triumph, we can be undone by the very things we hold most dear. Yet, as the flames of Troy flickered in the night, another story was unfolding. From the ashes of Troy, Odysseus, the master tactician and hero of the Greeks, would find himself at the heart of another battle. This time one of endurance, intelligence, and the struggle to return home. Odysseus's journey, far from over, was just beginning. For though the city of Troy had fallen, the true battle for Odysseus was only about to unfold. But before we follow Odysseus into the trials that awaited him, let us reflect on the nature of Troy's fall and what it teaches us about the limits of pride and the fragility of even the greatest civilizations. The Trojan horse was the final blow, but it was the Greeks' understanding of human nature, of the ways in which pride, vanity, and desire can blind us to reality, that allowed them to conquer the unconquerable. It is a lesson that we too must learn if we are to understand the true cost of ambition and the price of hubris. As the Greeks set sail from Troy, their victory hard won, they left behind a city in ruins, but even in its destruction, the legend of Troy would endure, its fall immortalized in the stories that would be passed down through the generations. The gods may have watched from their high thrones, but it was the humans, in all their folly and greatness, who would forever carry the burden of this legendary conflict. The fall of Troy was not just the end of a city, it was the end of an age, and the beginning of a new one that would be shaped by the stories of heroes, gods, and the consequences of their choices. What would await Odysseus as he sailed back to his homeland of Ithaca? What trials and temptations would test his resolve, his wits, and his very soul? The journey home was not one of simple victory, but of survival, intelligence, and the longing for reunion. Yet, as we look toward his fate, we must first acknowledge the true cost of Troy's fall, the price paid by those who dared to challenge the gods and the city that had once stood as the jewel of the ancient world. But from the ashes of Troy, Odysseus would rise, just as the myth of Troy itself would live on. The gods may have chosen sides in this war, but it was the mortals, touched by their arrogance and their desires, who would shape its legacy. Chapter 3: The Odyssey. Odysseus' call to return. The sea stretches endlessly before Odysseus, a vast expanse of salt water, waves rolling and crashing as if to erase the very memory of the great city of Troy from his mind. The air is thick with the smell of the ocean, and the sound of the wind in the sails is the only reminder of the world beyond. But for Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, this journey is far from over. The fall of Troy may have been won, but his personal war has just begun. What lies ahead is not a battle for conquest or glory, but a battle for survival, for home, and for the very essence of what it means to be human. The gods themselves will play a part in his fate, but it is Odysseus's heart, his mind, and his resilience that will ultimately determine whether he returns to Ithaca or becomes just another lost soul in the sea of time. Odysseus's journey is one of the most celebrated stories in Greek mythology, not because of his physical strength or heroic feats, but because of his intelligence, his cunning, and his unyielding desire to return home. He's not the archetypal warrior who relies on brute force to win his battles. Rather, he is a master of strategy, a king whose greatest weapon is his mind. But this mind, sharp as will not always be enough. Along the way, he will face challenges that no amount of intelligence can overcome, monsters that no amount of bravado can defeat, and temptations that threaten to take him away from his ultimate goal. The Odyssey is not just a tale of adventure and myth. It is a reflection of the human struggle to find one's way home, both physically and spiritually. It is a journey that speaks to our deepest fears, desires, and struggles. Each island Odysseus encounters, each trial he faces, is a step toward understanding the nature of home, the cost of his actions, and the complexity of the human spirit. As we embark on this journey with Odysseus, we are reminded that the greatest challenges in life are often not external obstacles but internal ones. His voyage is a reflection of the inner turmoil that we all face when we are confronted with the choices that define our lives. And just as Odysseus is tested by the gods and the monsters of myth, so too are we tested by the trials of our own making, by the choices we make, the temptations we give into, and the paths we choose to follow. The Odyssey begins not with a grand battle or a heroic quest, but with a longing, a desire to return home to Ithaca, to his wife, Penelope, and his son, Telemachus. The gods, however, have other plans. The journey that should have taken a matter of days or weeks will stretch into years. For the gods, this is a game. For Odysseus, it is a test of everything he holds dear. His first major challenge comes soon after the fall of Troy, when he and his men are blown off course by a storm sent by Poseidon, the god of the sea. This storm, the first of many, sets the tone for the journey that lies ahead. The gods are not benevolent, and their intervention in Odysseus's fate is as capricious as it is cruel. Poseidon, enraged by Odysseus's actions during the Trojan War, seeks to punish him, casting him adrift on the endless sea far from home. It is the beginning of a series of trials that will test Odysseus's very humanity. The first island Odysseus encounters is the land of the Lotus Eaters. The inhabitants of this island are not monsters or enemies in the traditional sense. They are peaceful, yet they possess a dangerous gift, the lotus plant. Those who consume it forget all desires, all goals, and become lost in a dreamlike state of contentment. The Lotus Eater's paradise is a trap, a subtle kind of imprisonment that threatens to strip away all sense of purpose. For a brief moment, Odysseus's men attempted to stay, to give up the struggle and bask in the false serenity of this idyllic world. But Odysseus, with his sharp mind and unyielding resolve, knows better. He drags his men back to the ships, forcing them to continue their journey. The temptation of the Lotus Eaters is one of the first of many distractions that Odysseus will face on his journey home, and it is a reminder of the dangers of complacency, of the seductive pull of pleasure and ease that can lead us away from our true purpose. From the Lotus Eaters, Odysseus sails on, encountering the infamous Cyclops Polyphemus. This encounter is one of the most iconic in Greek mythology, and it reveals the complexity of Odysseus as a hero. Polyphemus, a giant one-eyed monster, traps Odysseus and his men in his cave, intending to eat them one by one. But Odysseus, ever clever, devises a plan to escape. He tells Polyphemus that his name is Nobody, and when the giant falls asleep after drinking wine, Odysseus and his men drive a sharp stake into his single eye, blinding him. When Polyphemus calls for help, he tells his fellow Cyclopes that nobody is attacking him and they leave him alone. The trick works, and Odysseus and his men escape, but not without cost. Polyphemus curses Odysseus, calling upon his father Poseidon to avenge him. This curse will follow Odysseus throughout his journey, making the road home all the more treacherous. But the encounter with Polyphemus is more than just a thrilling tale of escape. It is a story of human ingenuity and survival in the face of overwhelming odds. It also reveals a crucial aspect of Odysseus's character. his tendency to trust in his own cleverness over brute force. While many heroes would have charged in with weapons drawn, Odysseus uses his intellect to find a solution. But it also highlights the potential danger of such reliance on cleverness, because Odysseus's boastful proclamation to Polyphemus as he sails away leads to even greater consequences. He taunts the Cyclops, revealing his true identity and thereby sealing his fate. The gods, particularly Poseidon, are angered, and his journey becomes even more difficult. Odysseus, it seems, cannot escape the consequences of his actions, no matter how clever or resourceful he is. Odysseus's journey is not just a physical one. It is a journey of the mind, of the soul. Each island he visits represents a different facet of the human experience, a challenge that tests not just his strength, but his character. From the island of Circe, where his men are transformed into swine, to the realm of the dead, where he confronts the spirits of those who came before him, Odysseus faces trials that challenge his deepest fears and desires. The most famous of these trials comes when he must navigate the perilous waters between the monsters Scylla and Charybdis, a whirlpool that threatens to swallow him whole. In this moment, Odysseus must make a choice: sacrifice a few of his men to Scylla, or risk everything to face Charybdis. His decision to sail closer to Scylla, knowing that some must die for the greater good, is a tragic but necessary choice, one that reflects the harsh realities of leadership and sacrifice. But perhaps the greatest trial Odysseus faces is not the monsters, the gods, or even the temptations that cross his path, but the internal battle within himself. His journey is as much about the struggle to return home as it is about the struggle to understand what home truly means. Ithaca, his wife Penelope, and his son Telemachus are the symbols of all that Odysseus desires. Yet, as the years pass, the meaning of home becomes more elusive. Is it the physical place he left behind, or the people he loves? Is home something to be reached, or is it something to be found within? As Odysseus faces these questions, his journey transforms from one of physical exploration to one of self-discovery. When he finally returns to Ithaca, after a journey that has lasted 20 years, Odysseus is a changed man. The gods, having toyed with him for so long, have allowed him to return, but only after he has proven his worth, his patience, and his understanding of what it means to truly be home. His reunion with Penelope is not just a happy ending, but a testament to the endurance of love and the strength of character that transcends time and space. The Odyssey is a journey that speaks to all of us, our desire for home, our struggles with identity, and the trials we face as we seek to overcome our own limitations. Odysseus's adventures are a mirror of the human condition, our search for meaning, our battle with temptation, and our yearning to return to something pure and unchanging. But the true message of the Odyssey is that home is not just a place, it is a state of mind. It is the place where we can find peace within ourselves, no matter the storm we face. Odysseus's journey is not just about returning to Ithaca, but about understanding that the journey itself is what shapes us, molds us, and ultimately leads us to a deeper understanding of who we are. As Odysseus sails toward the horizon, his journey is far from over. The world may change around him, but the lessons of the sea, the monsters, and the gods will remain with him forever. And so, we follow him, not just across the waves, but through the very fabric of the human soul, learning as he learns, growing as he grows, and finding our own way home. Chapter 4. The 12 Labours of Heracles. The first labour. The sun sets behind the rugged peaks of Mount Nemea, casting long shadows across the dry, rocky earth. The air is thick with the scent of dust and pine, the faint rustling of leaves carried on the evening breeze. At the foot of the mountain, Heracles stands, his towering figure silhouetted against the fading light, the weight of the world resting on his broad shoulders. The mighty hero, born of Zeus and the mortal Alcmene, is ready for his first trial, one that will test his strength, courage, and wit. Before him lies the Nemean lion, a creature so fierce, so invulnerable, that no mortal man has ever dared face it. But for Heracles, this is just the beginning. The 12 labours that lie ahead will define his legacy, shape his character, and test his very humanity. Heracles, one of the greatest heroes of Greek mythology, is not just a symbol of physical might. He embodies the virtues of endurance, perseverance, and unwavering determination. The 12 labours, a series of seemingly impossible tasks assigned to him by King Eurystheus of Tiryns, were meant to humble him, to break his spirit, to show that even the mightiest hero is not immune to the whims of the gods. Yet, as we look at the first of these labours, we see that Heracles is not simply a pawn in the gods' game. He is a man of destiny, a hero whose strength lies not just in his muscles, but in his ability to overcome the impossible. The Nemean lion, the first of Heracles' trials, is a creature of mythic proportions. Its fur is impervious to weapons, and its claws are sharp enough to tear through stone. It is a symbol of nature's raw power, untamed, wild, and destructive. The lion has terrorized the land for years, and no one has been able to stop it. Yet, Heracles approaches with a calm determination, knowing that his task is not one of brute force alone, but of intelligence, adaptability, and resourcefulness. When Heracles first encounters the Nemean lion, the creature charges at him with a deafening roar, its golden eyes burning with fury. With a mighty swing of his club, Heracles strikes, but the blow bounces harmlessly off the lion's thick hide. His first attempt is a failure, but Heracles does not falter. He knows that sheer strength will not win the day. The lion's fur, impervious to weapons, offers no weak spot for a conventional attack. But Heracles, ever resourceful, remembers a lesson he learned early in his life. When faced with a problem that cannot be solved through force, one must look for a different solution. It is then that Heracles realizes that the only way to defeat the lion is by strangling it, using his own raw strength, not a weapon. With hands as strong as iron, he grasps the lion's throat, and with a force that could break a mountain, he tightens his grip. The lion struggles, but Heracles' strength is overwhelming. Slowly, the great beast's resistance falters, and with a final, earth-shaking roar, the Nemean lion falls silent. The first labour is complete. Heracles stands victorious, the lifeless body of the lion at his feet. But his victory is not without cost. The lion's fur, so impervious to weapons, is also impervious to any normal means of removal. Heracles cannot simply drag the beast's carcass back to Eurystheus to prove his success. Yet, in a final act of resourcefulness, he uses the lion's own claws to skin its pelt, fashioning it into a cloak that will become his signature symbol, a mark of his strength, his ingenuity, and his triumph. From this moment on, the Nemean lion's pelt will serve as both armour and symbol, protecting Heracles from harm and reminding all who see him of his first great victory. The Nemean lion is a creature of mythic strength, but Heracles' victory is not just one of physical power. It is a victory of the mind, a lesson in the power of resourcefulness and determination. The lion, with all its raw strength and ferocity, could not withstand Heracles' ingenuity and will. The first labour is complete, but the trials that lie ahead are even more formidable, more dangerous, and more complex. For Heracles, the true test has only just begun. The first labour, however, is not just a tale of victory over a beast. It speaks to a deeper truth about the nature of heroism. The hero's journey is not simply about overcoming external obstacles, but about confronting internal struggles as well. Heracles' victory over the Nemean lion is a reflection of the battles we all face in our lives, the challenges that seem insurmountable, the problems that appear too great to overcome. It is a reminder that sometimes brute force is not enough to win the day. Instead, we must rely on our ingenuity, our adaptability, and our ability to find new solutions in the face of adversity. But Heracles' journey does not end with the lion. The 12 labours are a sequence of trials that will take him to the very edges of the known world and beyond. Each labour will test him in new ways, each one more dangerous and more daunting than the last. Yet, in completing these tasks, Heracles not only proves his strength and courage, but also begins to understand something deeper about himself. The first labour may have been a test of physical might, but the trials that lie ahead will test him in ways he never imagined. As we move on to the next of Heracles' labours, we see that his journey is not just about defeating monsters and completing impossible tasks. It is about understanding the true nature of heroism. Heroism, it seems, is not just about power, but about resilience, determination, and the ability to face whatever comes, no matter how daunting. In the face of the most fearsome creatures, the greatest challenges, and the most treacherous circumstances, Heracles will discover that true strength lies not in the body, but in the heart and mind. But before Heracles can face his next trial, we must pause to reflect on the lessons of the Nemean lion. What does this labour teach us about the nature of obstacles, both external and internal? What can we learn from Heracles' triumph over a creature that seemed undefeatable? The Nemean lion represents all the challenges in our lives that seem too great to overcome, whether they be personal, emotional, or external. Like the lion, these challenges can appear insurmountable, their strength and power seemingly unyielding. But Heracles' victory reminds us that even the most daunting trials can be overcome if we approach them with the right mindset, if we're willing to think outside the box, to adapt, and to rely on our inner strength and resourcefulness. The Nemean lion also speaks to the idea that sometimes we must use our enemies' strengths against them. Just as Heracles used the lion's own claws to skin its pelt, we too can learn to turn our challenges into opportunities. Whether it is a difficult situation at work, a personal struggle, or a seemingly insurmountable obstacle, we can learn to use our own strengths and our resourcefulness to overcome what stands before us. The first labour is not just a tale of a hero slaying a monster. It is a reminder that we too have the power to face our challenges, to rise above them, and to emerge stronger on the other side. The Nemean lion represents not just the physical challenges we face, but the psychological and emotional ones as well. It is a reminder that we all have within us the strength to face the monsters that lie in wait, whether they are external forces or internal fears. The true nature of Heracles' victory is not that he defeated the lion, but that he found a way to overcome the impossible. His victory over the lion is a symbol of human perseverance, of the will to survive, and of the strength that comes from within. As we move forward in Heracles' journey, we're reminded that the labours are not just about strength, they're about the trials of life itself. Each labour is a test of character, of resolve, and of the human spirit. The first labour, the defeat of the Nemean lion, is just the beginning of a journey that will take Heracles into the heart of myth, where every victory is hard won, and every defeat brings lessons that shape the very essence of who he is. And so, as Heracles stands tall, the pelt of the Nemean lion draped over his shoulders, we are left with the knowledge that the journey ahead will be long and hard. But if the first labour is any indication, Heracles will meet every challenge head-on, using not just his strength, but his intelligence, his resolve, and his heart. And in the process, He will prove that heroism is not about never falling, but about rising every time we do. With the Nemean lion defeated, the next labour awaits, and with it, another trial that will push Heracles to the very limits of his strength and character. But first, let us pause to reflect on the lessons we've learned from this first victory. In the face of impossible odds, it is not the size of the enemy that matters, it is the size of the hero's heart. Chapter 5. The Myth of Pandora's Box. The Curse of Curiosity. The sun is setting over the ancient Greek landscape, casting long golden shadows across the earth. The sky, a soft hue of amber and crimson, speaks of both an end and a beginning, as if the day itself is a metaphor for the story of humanity, a tale of creation, desire, and consequence. Below, in the realm of the gods, there is quiet murmuring, a gathering of divine beings whose decisions will forever alter the course of mortal lives. And at the centre of this divine council stands Pandora, a woman created by Zeus himself, tasked with carrying a gift that would change everything for humanity. Pandora, the first woman, is a paradox in herself. Beautiful, curious and innocent, she is an enigma, both a symbol of creation and a harbinger of destruction. She is the daughter of the gods, crafted by Hephaestus, with the gifts of charm, grace, and an irresistible allure. But her very existence is burdened with a gift that cannot be unwrapped, a curse wrapped in the guise of curiosity. The story of Pandora is one that speaks to the nature of desire, the dangers of unchecked curiosity, and the consequences of acts that cannot be undone. It begins with Zeus, the king of the gods, who, angered by Prometheus's theft of fire from the heavens to give to humanity, devises a plan to punish mankind. His solution is both simple and profound: create a woman, Pandora, to serve as the vessel of the gods' wrath. To her he gives a jar, a vessel that contains all the evils that will plague mankind: sorrow, disease, war, greed, envy, and death. She is told not to open it, for within lies the very essence of the suffering that will forever stain humanity. Pandora is given this jar, along with the knowledge that it holds an unimaginable power, a gift from the gods themselves that must never be touched. And yet, despite the warnings, despite the solemn counsel of the gods, Pandora cannot resist. It is the nature of humans, perhaps even the nature of gods, to be drawn to that which is forbidden. It is curiosity that drives Pandora, the same force that drives all of us. It is this insatiable desire to know, to understand, to uncover the mysteries of the world that has shaped human progress. And in this case, it is curiosity that leads Pandora to open the jar. As the lid of the jar is lifted, the evils of the world pour forth like a tidal wave, flooding the earth with suffering, disease, poverty, hatred, and death. All are unleashed, spreading across the land and leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Pandora, horrified by what she has done, quickly tries to close the jar, but it is too late. The evils have already escaped, and there is no turning back. The world is forever changed, and humanity, once innocent and unburdened, is now faced with the weight of these evils. But there is one thing left in the jar. One gift remains untouched by the forces that have spilled out into the world: hope. This last gift, this last spark of light lingers in the jar, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is still the possibility of redemption, of healing, of light. Hope remains, and it is this hope that will sustain humanity through the trials and tribulations that will follow. Pandora's story is one of profound significance, as it speaks to the essence of the human experience. It is a tale of temptation, of curiosity, and of the consequences of actions that cannot be undone. It is a story that explores the dual nature of discovery, the ways in which some knowledge can bring great suffering, while other knowledge can offer salvation. Pandora's curiosity in opening the jar releases a torrent of evils that forever alter the course of humanity's existence. Yet, in the same moment, the gods allow hope to remain, a glimmer of light in an otherwise darkened world. The myth of Pandora is a mirror to our own experiences. Just as Pandora was driven by her curiosity, so too are we often drawn to the forbidden, the unknown. We are compelled to seek answers, to uncover the mysteries that lie hidden before us. But in doing so, we often expose ourselves to risks and consequences that we cannot foresee. Pandora's mistake was not merely that she opened the jar, it was that she failed to understand the weight of the power she was dealing with. Her curiosity, her desire to know, led her to make a decision that would forever change the course of human history. This story raises fundamental questions about the nature of knowledge itself. What happens when we uncover things we're not meant to know? What happens when curiosity pushes us beyond the boundaries set by those who understand the dangers? Pandora's act of opening the jar is a reminder of the importance of restraint, of knowing when to stop, when to heed the warnings, when to resist the temptation to look deeper. It is a lesson about the price of knowledge, about the burden of discovery, and about the potential consequences of pursuing answers without considering the cost. Pandora, in her innocence and beauty, symbolizes the human inclination toward curiosity. She's not malicious, nor is she evil. Rather, she's a reflection of the impulse that lies within all of us to explore, to seek, to understand. It is this very impulse that has driven human progress, that has led us to unravel the mysteries of the universe, to make discoveries that have transformed our world. But Pandora's myth also serves as a warning that not all knowledge is benign, and some discoveries come with a price that cannot be paid back. The act of opening the jar represents the moment when we venture into the unknown without fully understanding the consequences. Yet, even in the face of overwhelming darkness, there is hope. The last gift left in the jar is the most important of all, for it is hope that sustains humanity in the face of adversity. Hope, unlike the evils unleashed by Pandora's actions, cannot be extinguished. It is a light that persists even when the world seems consumed by suffering. Hope is the force that drives us to continue, to push forward despite the challenges, to seek a better future even when the past weighs heavy upon us. And so, while Pandora's curiosity may have led to the release of suffering, it is hope that ultimately allows humanity to endure. The myth of Pandora is, in many ways, a story of human growth and the complexity of our existence. It teaches us that every discovery, every action, carries with it both light and shadow. For every benefit that comes with knowledge, there is a cost that must be borne. Pandora's box is not simply a tale of curiosity gone awry. It is a reflection of the delicate balance between human ambition and the limits of our understanding. It speaks to the choices we make, the risks we take, and the responsibility that comes with the pursuit of knowledge. Yet while Pandora's actions open the door to suffering, the story is not one of pure tragedy, for hope remains. It is in this small but infinitely powerful gift that we find the strength to face whatever challenges come our way. Hope is what drives us to rebuild, to heal, and to strive for something better. It is what gives us the courage to face the darkness and move toward the light. And so, while Pandora may have released all the evils of the world, she also left us with the one thing that can carry us through, the belief that despite everything, there is always hope. Pandora's myth is timeless, for it speaks to the heart of the human experience. It reflects our endless curiosity, our thirst for knowledge, and the consequences of our actions. But it also offers us something precious, the reminder that, no matter how dark the world becomes, there is always a flicker of hope that can guide us forward. In the end, the myth of Pandora teaches us that even in the face of our greatest mistakes, there is always a chance for redemption, a chance to rise from the ashes and find light where there once was none. As we reflect on Pandora's story, we are left with a question. What will we do with the hope that remains in the jar? Will we use it to rebuild, to heal, and to move forward? Or will we, like Pandora, be consumed by the dangers of our own curiosity, allowing the darkness to overtake us? The choice, as always, lies in our hands. Chapter 6. The Story of Medusa. From beauty to monster. Deep in the temple of Athena, amidst the shadows of marble columns and the scent of burning incense, Medusa sits alone. Her once beautiful face, now twisted into something far darker, reflects the consequences of divine wrath. What was once a vision of stunning beauty, admired by mortals and gods alike, is now a grotesque transformation. Her hair turned into a writhing mass of serpents, her gaze capable of turning anyone who meets it into stone. Medusa, once a maiden of extraordinary allure, has become something unrecognizable, a monster cursed by the gods, condemned to live in isolation and fear. Her story is a tragic one, filled with themes of beauty, punishment, and revenge, revealing the dark side of both the divine and the mortal world. Medusa's tale begins not with hatred or malice, but with innocence. A young woman, a mortal, who caught the eye of the god Poseidon. Medusa, revered for her beauty, was not only loved by mortals but caught the attention of the gods themselves. She was, by all accounts, a vision, her golden hair cascading down her back like sunlight, her face so beautiful that it could make even the gods pause in their eternal pursuits. But it was this very beauty, this gift that set her apart from others, that would eventually lead to her downfall. The myth surrounding Medusa's transformation is as tragic as it is unjust. Poseidon, the mighty god of the sea, became enamored with her, but in an act of violation he assaulted her within the sacred temple of Athena, a crime not just against Medusa, but against the goddess herself. In the eyes of Athena, the temple was a place of purity, and no god, no mortal was to defile it. Athena, furious at Poseidon's disrespect, turned her wrath not against the god of the seas, but against Medusa. It was Medusa who would pay the price for the crime of another, for she was punished by the very goddess whose temple had been desecrated. Athena's punishment was nothing short of cruel. She transformed Medusa's once beautiful hair into serpents, each one writhing in eternal motion. Her eyes, once filled with innocence and kindness, became the instruments of death. Anyone who looked directly into them would be turned to stone, their life extinguished in an instant. Medusa, once revered and sought after, was now a monstrous figure shunned by all. She was cast into exile, driven away from the world of men and gods, forced to live alone, her beauty now turned into a deadly curse. The transformation of Medusa from a beautiful maiden into a horrifying monster speaks to the extremes of divine power, the fickleness of the gods, and the unjust suffering inflicted upon mortals. Medusa's fate was sealed not by her own actions, but by the decisions of others, Poseidon's crime and Athena's wrath. In her punishment, we see the power of beauty to both uplift and destroy. Medusa's beauty, once a gift, became the very source of her misery. The gods, whose jealousy and pride often led them to meddle in mortal affairs, do not hesitate to impose their wrath on those who cross them, no matter the consequences. In Medusa's case, beauty itself became the thing that condemned her. Yet, Medusa's story is not just about divine punishment, it is also about the human experience of suffering and transformation. The myth explores how we can be shaped by our circumstances, how pain can change us, and how suffering can strip away our former selves, replacing innocence with bitterness and anger. Medusa, in her isolation, became a figure of rage, her monstrous form a reflection of the injustice she endured. Her transformation is both physical and emotional. The beautiful woman becomes a creature of terror, her appearance a mirror of the anguish she feels. Medusa's isolation in the wilderness, far from the world of men and gods, serves as a powerful symbol of alienation. She's no longer seen as a person, but as a monster, a being to be feared and avoided. Her once beautiful face is now a mask of horror, and her gaze, once capable of evoking love, is now a deadly weapon. This is the ultimate tragedy of Medusa. She's a victim of a crime she didn't commit, forced to live with a curse that turns her into a symbol of both beauty and death. Her transformation speaks to the ways in which we, as individuals, can become defined by our suffering. When we are wronged, when we are abandoned or betrayed, we can become like Medusa, angry, vengeful, and isolated from the world around us. Beauty, once a source of admiration, can turn into a weapon of destruction, a reflection of pain and grief. Medusa's story also touches on the destructive power of revenge. Her curse is not just a punishment, it is a form of vengeance. Athena's anger towards Poseidon is vented through Medusa, who is forced to bear the burden of the gods' quarrels. This act of divine retribution, however, does not serve to cleanse the world of evil. Instead, it perpetuates suffering, leading Medusa to become an embodiment of revenge itself. In the end, Medusa's curse is as much about the gods' desire for justice as it is about their inability to heal the wounds they cause. But Medusa's transformation into a monster does not just remain a tale of punishment, it is also a story of power and autonomy. Though she is cursed by the gods, Medusa's story does not end in defeat. She may be a monster, but she's also a being with agency, with power. And while she's feared and hated by the world around her, there is a strange beauty in her autonomy. She no longer depends on the approval of others. Her beauty, once the object of desire, has been replaced by a new kind of power, the ability to turn anyone to stone. Medusa's curse becomes, in a sense, her weapon, her power to control the world around her. Her fate, once defined by the actions of the gods, becomes something she can control. Heracles, one of the greatest heroes in Greek mythology, will eventually be tasked with slaying Medusa as part of his 12 labours. His task is to be a hero, to free the world from Medusa's curse. And yet, when we look at Medusa's fate, we are left questioning the true nature of heroism. Is Heracles' victory over Medusa an act of justice, or is it another form of divine punishment, an attempt to undo the wrongs inflicted upon her? In slaying Medusa, Heracles does not just remove a threat to the mortal world. He kills a woman who was unjustly transformed and punished. The killing of Medusa becomes an act of mercy, a tragic attempt to free her from the burden of her curse. But what of the lesson it imparts? Does slaying the monster truly solve the problem, or does it merely continue the cycle of violence and suffering? Heracles, in his own way, is a hero who embodies the qualities of strength, courage, and resolve. But in the story of Medusa, we see that heroism is not always black and white. Heracles' triumph over Medusa may be seen as a victory for mankind, but it is also a reminder of the gods' unchecked power and the destructive consequences of their interventions. Medusa, in her isolation, in her pain, is a tragic figure, a woman who was transformed by forces beyond her control, whose beauty became a curse, and whose suffering led her to become a symbol of vengeance. The myth of Medusa is not simply a tale of beauty and terror, it is a reflection of the complexities of power, punishment, and identity. Medusa's transformation from a beautiful maiden into a hideous monster is a metaphor for the ways in which suffering can change us, can distort us, can turn us into something we were never meant to be. It is a story that speaks to the ways in which beauty, power, and pain are intertwined, and how the actions of others can shape our lives in ways we cannot control. Medusa's death, at the hands of Heracles or Perseus, is not a clean victory. It is not a solution to the problem of her existence. Her death represents the tragic end of a life defined by both beauty and torment. And as Heracles walks away from the scene, with Medusa's severed head in hand, we are left with the uneasy feeling that the story of Medusa is far from over, that her suffering, her transformation, and the consequences of her curse will linger long after her death. Medusa's myth speaks to us about the nature of divine power, human suffering, and the cost of transformation. She is a symbol of how beauty, power, and innocence can be twisted by the gods into something monstrous, and of how suffering can transform even the most innocent of souls into something unrecognizable. Her story is one of injustice, but it is also a story of power and autonomy. She may have been cursed, but in her transformation, she found a kind of strength, a power that was her own, even if it came at a great cost. And so, as we remember Medusa, we are reminded of the fragility of beauty, the consequences of divine retribution, and the ways in which our actions, both mortal and divine, can shape the very essence of who we are. Medusa's legacy endures, not as a symbol of terror, but as a tragic figure whose beauty and pain will forever haunt the world of the gods and men alike. Chapter 7. The Tale of Icarus. The dangers of ambition. The sky stretches endlessly before him, an expanse of blue and white, vast and inviting. The sun, warm and golden, glows with a promise of freedom. Icarus, the young son of Daedalus, feels the cool wind rush through his hair as he takes his first tentative steps into the air. His wings, crafted by his father, beat softly against the air, their waxen feathers glistening in the sunlight. There is a moment of weightlessness, of exhilaration. He is free. For the first time, Icarus feels like a god, as if the heavens themselves have opened before him and offered him a glimpse of infinity. But the promise of flight, like all things in life, comes with a price Icarus is too young, too eager to understand. The story of Icarus is one of the most enduring and tragic in Greek mythology, a cautionary tale that speaks to the dangers of ambition, of overreach, and of the human desire to transcend our limitations. It is a story of flight, of soaring higher than one was ever meant to go, and the inevitable fall that follows. It is a reminder that the pursuit of greatness, while noble, can sometimes blind us to the very forces that govern our world, forces that cannot be ignored no matter how high we rise. Icarus's father, Daedalus, was a man of extraordinary intellect and creativity. A master craftsman and inventor, Daedalus had built the labyrinth on the island of Crete, a maze so intricate and complex that even its creator struggled to navigate it. But it was not just his ability to build that made him remarkable, it was his relentless pursuit of the unknown. Daedalus sought to conquer the impossible, to defy the boundaries of what the world considered achievable. His most ambitious project, however, would be the wings that he fashioned for himself and his son. These wings were no mere toys, they were an invention of genius. Made from feathers, wax and string, they were the culmination of Daedalus's knowledge of flight, the product of his desire to break free from the chains of the earth and soar like the birds in the sky. For Daedalus, the wings represented freedom, a way to escape the confines of the labyrinth, the island of Crete, and even his own mortality. But they were also a symbol of human ambition, the desire to rise above our limitations, to reach for the stars, to achieve something beyond our grasp. When Daedalus and Icarus found themselves imprisoned by King Minos of Crete, it was these wings that would offer them their only hope of escape. Daedalus, ever the genius, fashioned a pair of wings for himself and his son, giving them both the means to fly out of the labyrinth and away from the island. But before they took flight, Daedalus gave his son a solemn warning. "Icarus, my son, do not fly too low, for the dampness of the sea will weigh down your wings, and do not fly too high, for the sun will melt the wax that holds them together. Keep a steady course, and you will reach safety." These words, spoken by Daedalus, are filled with wisdom, grounded in the reality of human limitations. The wings, no matter how beautifully crafted, were still fragile, subject to the forces of nature that governed the world. The sky was vast, yes, but it was also treacherous, and Icarus, in his youthful exuberance and overwhelming desire to experience the full glory of flight, would not heed the warning. The promise of the sky was too alluring, too powerful to resist. As father and son ascended into the air, the world below grew smaller, the island of Crete shrinking beneath their feet. Daedalus, ever cautious, kept a steady pace, soaring high but carefully within the boundaries of his father's advice. But Icarus, intoxicated by the wind rushing past him and the thrill of the heights, could not help himself. He flew higher and higher, drawn to the sun, to the vast expanse above him, to the dream of touching the very heavens themselves. At first, there was nothing but the blissful sensation of flight, the freedom of soaring above the world, untethered and unhindered. The sun bathed Icarus in golden light, the wind lifting him ever upward. But as he climbed higher, the heat of the sun began to soften the wax holding his wings together. The feathers, once secure, began to loosen, to flutter, to fall away. The wings, once so strong, began to deteriorate, the delicate structure no match for the intensity of the sun's rays. It was at this moment that Icarus realized his mistake. By reaching for the sky, he had defied the natural order of things. In his ambition, he had ignored the very limitations that Daedalus had warned him about. The wax in his wings melted and the feathers fluttered to the ground. Icarus plummeted faster and faster toward the sea below. His fall was swift, inevitable, and fatal. The boy who had once soared so high was now lost to the depths of the ocean, his body swallowed by the very element he had sought to conquer. The death of Icarus is a tragic end to a story filled with promise and possibility. His ambition, his desire to transcend his mortal limitations, was his undoing. The sky, which had once seemed so welcoming, became his grave. His fall was not just a physical one, but a metaphor for the dangers of overreach, the dangers of striving for something greater than oneself without understanding the consequences of such ambition. The tale of Icarus speaks to a fundamental truth about human nature. Our desire to transcend our limitations, to reach beyond the boundaries of our mortal existence, is often accompanied by a sense of hubris. We seek greatness, not always understanding the dangers that come with it. Icarus, in his youthful enthusiasm, could not fathom the consequences of his actions. He believed that the sky was his to conquer, that nothing could stand in his way. But the sun, indifferent to his plight, burned him down, and his wings melted away, leaving him to fall. Icarus's story is one of ambition unchecked by wisdom, of youthful exuberance that overlooks the lessons of experience. His tale speaks to the dangers of overconfidence, the belief that we are invincible, that we can achieve anything we set our minds to, without regard for the limitations that govern the natural world. Icarus's fall is not just a physical descent, it is a descent into the realm of human frailty. It reminds us that no matter how high we rise, no matter how far we reach, there are forces beyond our control, forces that we must respect, not defy. And yet, the myth of Icarus is not solely one of tragedy. It is also a reflection of the human spirit, the courage to dream, the audacity to reach for something greater. Icarus, despite his fall, represents the pursuit of the impossible, the willingness to take risks, to challenge the status quo. His ambition, though misguided, is a testament to the desire for something more. In his flight, we see the spark of creativity, the desire to break free from the limitations imposed upon us by the world. But it's important to recognize that ambition, in and of itself, is not inherently wrong. The desire to achieve, to push the boundaries of what is possible, is a driving force behind human progress. It is through ambition that we have explored new frontiers, created works of art, and made scientific discoveries that have changed the world. But Icarus's story serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder that ambition, when pursued without balance or wisdom, can lead to destruction. In many ways, Icarus's story is a metaphor for the modern world. In our pursuit of success, of greatness, of innovation, we often overlook the dangers of our own ambition. We reach for the stars without considering the consequences of such a reach. We strive to transcend our limitations without understanding the fragile nature of the wings that support us. Just as Icarus soared higher than he was meant to, we too often push forward without considering the forces that might bring us down. The lesson of Icarus is one of balance, of understanding the limits of our own power and the necessity of caution in the face of ambition. It is about knowing when to push forward and when to pull back. It is about recognizing that while the sky may be vast and inviting, it is not ours to command. The sun, in its heat, will always burn us if we fly too close. But even in the tragic fall of Icarus, there is a sense of beauty, a beauty in his flight, in his ambition, in his willingness to strive for something greater. He may have fallen, but in his fall, he captured the very essence of human aspiration. His story is one of striving, of reaching beyond our grasp, of daring to dream. It is a reminder that, though we may fall, the very act of reaching, of attempting the impossible, is what defines us as human beings. As Icarus fell to the sea, his wings shattered, his body lost to the depths, the sky above remained unchanged. The sun continued to shine, the winds continued to blow, and the world moved on. Icarus, in the end, became a symbol of both the glory and the danger of ambition. His rise, though brief, was a testament to the human spirit, the spirit that dares to dream, to soar, to reach for the heavens. But it is his fall that teaches us the most, for in his descent we're reminded that the pursuit of greatness, while noble, must always be tempered by wisdom, humility, and an understanding of the forces that govern our world. Chapter 8. Reflection on Greek Myths. Lessons from the past. The myths of ancient Greece, woven through with gods, heroes, and creatures of legend, are much more than stories. They are reflections of the human experience. These tales, passed down through generations, were not just meant to entertain, but to offer insight into the struggles and triumphs of life itself. Through the battles, the falls, and the triumphs of gods and mortals alike, these myths explore the timeless truths about our nature, the complexity of emotion, the allure of ambition, the dangers of pride, and the delicate balance between fate and free will. As we journeyed through the myth of the Trojan War, the tragic story of Medusa, the rise and fall of Icarus, and many others, we have seen how each myth speaks to universal themes that remain just as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. From the beginning of the myth of the Trojan War, we witnessed how pride, desire, and ego led to a conflict that would leave the world forever changed. The judgment of Paris, the act of vanity that set into motion a war that lasted for 10 years, serves as a poignant reminder of the destructive power of human pride. The myth of the fall of Troy and the cleverness of the Greeks in their use of the Trojan horse reflect not only the power of strategy, but also the vulnerability that comes with pride. It tells us that even the mightiest cities, the strongest kingdoms, and the most fortified walls can crumble when arrogance and self-delusion take hold. The Greeks and Trojans, both blinded by their sense of superiority, found themselves caught in a cycle of vengeance and bloodshed that seemed inevitable. The gods themselves involved in the conflict could not avoid the consequences of their actions. Their interference, whether direct or indirect, had profound consequences on the mortals they manipulated. And yet, amid the chaos, we are left with a timeless question. How often do we, as humans, find ourselves entangled in conflicts driven by ego, pride, and desire? How many of the wars, personal or collective, in our own lives have been born of such emotions? Moving to the myth of Medusa, we explored the complexity of divine retribution and its impact on the mortal world. Medusa, once a beautiful maiden, transformed into a monster, was punished not for her own actions, but for the crime of another. This unjust punishment, inflicted by Athena in response to Poseidon's assault, became a symbol of the ways in which the innocent are often caught in the crossfire of conflicts they did not instigate. Medusa's curse reflects the destructive power of revenge and punishment, but it also speaks to the resilience of the human spirit. Despite her monstrous form and the isolation it imposed upon her, Medusa retained a certain power, a tragic and sorrowful strength. Her story challenges us to think about the ways in which we too might become prisoners of others' actions, and how, in the face of great suffering, we must decide how to wield our own power and agency. Medusa's story also reflects the consequences of unchecked desire and the fragility of beauty. Her transformation speaks to the complexities of divine power, beauty, and vengeance. In Medusa, we see how beauty, once her greatest asset, becomes the very thing that defines her fall. How often in our own lives do we find that the qualities we take pride in, or the things we think define us, can become the source of our greatest suffering? Medusa's tale teaches us that beauty, like any power, must be understood and wielded carefully, for it can easily be twisted into something that becomes a curse rather than a blessing. From Medusa's tragedy, we turn to the myth of Icarus, whose ambition soared higher than the limits of the world could bear. Icarus's flight toward the sun is one of the most powerful symbols of ambition unchecked by wisdom. His desire to transcend human limitations, to soar above the world and reach for something greater, led to his tragic fall. The myth of Icarus speaks to the dangers of hubris, the overreaching belief that we are invincible, that we can push beyond our limits without consequences. The warning from Daedalus, his father, not to fly too high or too low, was a lesson in moderation, a reminder that balance is key in all things. Icarus, in his youthful excitement, ignored this warning and paid the ultimate price. But Icarus's story is not merely a cautionary tale, it is also a reflection of the universal human drive to achieve greatness. His ambition, while tragically misguided, represents the desire in all of us to rise above the ordinary, to reach for the extraordinary. The myth speaks to the dual nature of human aspiration. On one hand, it inspires us to strive for something greater, to dream big. On the other, it warns us of the peril that comes with disregarding our limitations. How often do we, in our own lives, chase dreams without considering the cost, the risks, and the consequences of reaching too far? Icarus's fall is a painful reminder that, While ambition can drive us toward greatness, it must be tempered with wisdom, humility, and an understanding of our own fragility. These myths, when viewed together, offer a profound reflection on the human condition. They explore the themes of pride, ambition, love, revenge, and the consequences of our actions. Through the lens of Greek mythology, we see how gods and mortals alike are subject to forces beyond their control, forces that shape their destinies in ways they cannot predict or escape. The gods themselves are not immune to the consequences of their actions, whether it is Athena's punishment of Medusa or Zeus's judgment in the Trojan War. Even the gods, powerful as they are, must contend with the weight of their decisions. And yet, despite the overwhelming power of the gods, there is also a deep sense of human agency. The heroes of these myths, Odysseus, Heracles, Perseus, and others, embody the struggle to understand and navigate the forces that shape their lives. While the gods may determine the course of events, it is the mortals who must live with the consequences, the choices they make, the way they confront the challenges they face, speak to the resilience of the human spirit. They remind us that, even in the face of divine wrath, even when we are caught in the storms of fate, we can still choose how we respond. Take, for instance, the story of Odysseus. While the gods intervene time and again, Odysseus' greatest strength lies not in his ability to overpower his enemies, but in his cleverness, his persistence, and his determination to return home. His journey is not just one of physical travel, but of moral and emotional growth. His encounters with monsters, gods, and temptations are not just tests of strength, but of character. His journey reflects the inner struggle we all face when confronted with the unknown, with temptation, and with the search for purpose. In the end, Odysseus is not just a hero because of his victory over external forces, but because he has learned to navigate the complexities of his own soul, the desires that drive him, and the responsibilities he must bear. Odysseus' journey also speaks to the themes of identity and homecoming. Throughout the Odyssey, Odysseus is not just trying to return to Ithaca, he's trying to return to himself. His time spent in the world of the gods, in the world of temptation and loss, is a process of self-discovery. It is in his long absence from home that he learns who he truly is, how he can be both a warrior and a leader, both a man of intelligence and of action. His story is one of transformation, of finding strength not just in his physical abilities, but in his understanding of his own limits, desires, and responsibilities. Likewise, Heracles' 12 labours reflect the trials we all face as we strive to overcome adversity. The labours themselves, each one more difficult and dangerous than the last, are symbolic of the challenges that life throws at us. But Heracles, through his strength and perseverance, overcomes them all. In his journey, we see the importance of resilience, of the ability to keep going even when faced with seemingly insurmountable odds. His labours are not just tests of strength, but of character. They ask not just, how strong are you, but how long can you endure? How much are you willing to sacrifice in order to reach your goals? Heracles' journey reflects the resilience that lies within all of us, the ability to rise time and again in the face of failure, hardship, and loss. As we reflect on these myths, we're reminded that the stories of gods and heroes are not just distant relics of a past civilization. They are mirrors of our own lives, reflecting the eternal struggles, the victories and defeats, the hopes and fears that define our humanity. In each myth, we find something of ourselves, our desires, our flaws, our strengths, and our weaknesses. These ancient stories remind us that no matter how far we have come, we're still bound by the same forces that shaped the gods and heroes of old. And in that, there is both comfort and challenge, Greek mythology is not just a history of gods and monsters, it is a history of us all. It offers timeless lessons about the nature of power, the cost of ambition, and the importance of understanding our own limits. Through the stories of gods and mortals, we come to understand the fragility of life, the consequences of our actions, and the transformative power of the choices we make. These myths are not just stories, they are the foundations of our understanding of the world, of ourselves, and of the forces that shape our destinies. As we close the chapter on these ancient tales, we carry their lessons with us. The stories of the Trojan War, Medusa, Icarus, and the others are not just relics of a long-forgotten age. They are living, breathing truths that continue to shape us today. And as we face the challenges of our own lives, we're reminded that the lessons of the past, of pride, ambition, love, and fate, are just as relevant now as they ever were. The myths of ancient Greece are not just ancient tales, they are the stories of the human spirit, forever etched in the fabric of time. Chapter 9: Echoes of the Gods, the timeless lessons of myth. As the night deepens and the stars shine brightly overhead, we find ourselves once more beneath the vast eternal sky, connected not just to the world of ancient Greece, but to the enduring legacy of its myths. The tales we've explored, from the Trojan War to the fall of Icarus, from the punishment of Medusa to the wisdom of Odysseus, have carried us through the corridors of time, drawing us into the ancient world. Yet these stories are not confined to the past. They live within us, in the choices we make, the dreams we chase, and the struggles we face. The heroes, gods, and creatures of Greek mythology may have walked the earth long ago, but their stories echo in our hearts, reminding us of the complexities of the human condition, our desires, our failings, and our unyielding search for meaning. Tonight, we have journeyed through the realm of gods and mortals alike. We have seen the heights of ambition and the depths of despair, the beauty of courage and the price of pride. In the stories of heroes like Odysseus and Heracles, we have witnessed the trials of strength and intelligence, the battle against impossible odds, and the growth that comes from overcoming adversity. In the myths of Icarus and Medusa, we have encountered the darker aspects of human nature, the dangers of unchecked ambition, the cruelty of divine punishment, and the consequences of desire. Through it all, we have learned something profound about the nature of heroism, power, love, and the frailty of the human spirit. But perhaps above all, we have learned that the ancient myths of Greece are not just about gods and monsters, they are about us. They reflect our deepest fears, our most daring dreams, and the complex nature of our existence. In the heroes who rise and fall, in the gods who punish and forgive, we see ourselves mirrored, our own struggles, our triumphs, and the lessons we learn along the way. For in the end, the myths remind us that we're all part of this vast, interconnected story. The stories of the gods may be ancient, but the questions they ask are timeless. As we reflect on these tales, we're reminded of the importance of balance, of knowing when to reach for the stars and when to remain grounded, when to fight and when to surrender, when to embrace our strengths and when to confront our weaknesses. The gods and heroes of ancient Greece were not infallible. They made mistakes, they fell from grace, and they were shaped by the choices they made. Yet, in their stories, we see the possibility of redemption, the potential for growth, and the power of understanding. Through their struggles, we come to understand that it is not our successes that define us, but our ability to rise after we fall. The myth of the Trojan War, for instance, shows us how pride and desire can lead to ruin. The Greeks and Trojans, blinded by their egos, brought about their own destruction. Yet, amid the chaos, there were those who rose above the conflict, those who showed the wisdom to seek peace rather than perpetuate violence. In this, we are reminded that while wars may be inevitable, the true battle lies within us, the battle to rise above our baser instincts, to seek understanding, and to build something greater than ourselves. Medusa's story speaks to the power of transformation, both in terms of punishment and redemption. In her tragic fate, we see the consequences of divine wrath and the lasting impact of trauma. But we also see the power of resilience, of how even in our darkest moments there is the possibility for a new beginning. Medusa, though cursed, retained her agency. She controlled the very power that had once been used to destroy her. In this, we're reminded that our pain does not define us. It is how we respond to it, how we transform ourselves in the face of adversity that shapes our destiny. The myth of Icarus offers us a powerful lesson in the dangers of unchecked ambition. Icarus, in his eagerness to break free from the constraints of the earth, soared too high and paid the ultimate price. Yet, in his fall, we find something beautiful, a reminder of the human spirit's unyielding desire to reach beyond the ordinary, to achieve greatness. Icarus's story is a tragic one, yes, but it is also a reflection of our own aspirations, our own dreams, and the price that must sometimes be paid for the pursuit of the impossible. The lesson here is not to stifle ambition, but to temper it with wisdom, to understand the limitations of our own power, and to know when to rise and when to fall. And then, we have the journey of Odysseus, one of the most enduring tales of perseverance, wit, and the search for home. His journey across the seas filled with monsters, gods, and temptation is not just a physical voyage, it is a journey of self-discovery. Odysseus' return to Ithaca to his wife Penelope and son Telemachus is not just the resolution of a long adventure, it is the culmination of his understanding of what truly matters. Through his trials, Odysseus learns that home is not just a place, but a state of being, a place of belonging, love, and peace. In Odysseus, we see that the greatest journey is not always outward, but inward, as we seek to understand ourselves and the world around us. As we reflect on these stories, we are reminded that the greatest lessons we can learn often come not from victory, but from struggle. The heroes of Greek mythology are not perfect. They are flawed, vulnerable, and human. But it is through their flaws, their mistakes, and their moments of weakness that they find their true strength. The myths, in all their complexity, show us that heroism is not about being invincible or flawless. It is about rising above our challenges, learning from our failures, and continuing to move forward, even when the road seems impossible. In our own lives, we too are faced with challenges, moments when we must confront our weaknesses, face our fears, and find the courage to keep going. The gods may not walk among us, and the monsters may not be as literal as those in the stories, but the lessons of the myths remain as relevant as ever. We may not possess the strength of Heracles or the wisdom of Odysseus, but we all have the capacity for growth, transformation, and resilience. The gods may have shaped the fates of mortals, but it is we who ultimately decide how we will respond to the trials before us. The myths also teach us about the complexity of love, duty, and sacrifice. In Odysseus' long journey home, we see a man willing to endure unimaginable hardships to reunite with his family. In Heracles' labours, we see a hero willing to sacrifice his own comfort for the greater good. In Medusa's curse, we see the destructive power of desire, and in the fall of Troy, we see the consequences of vanity. Love and duty often come at a cost, and yet they are the forces that drive us to act, to strive, and to seek something beyond ourselves. The Greek myths remind us that while we may face darkness and hardship, It is our connections to others, our sense of purpose, and our willingness to sacrifice that define our legacy. And so, as we come to the end of our journey through the world of Greek mythology, we must ask ourselves, what lessons do we take with us? What do these ancient stories, these tales of gods and heroes teach us about our own lives, our own struggles, and our own aspirations? Perhaps the greatest lesson is this, that life is not about avoiding mistakes, but about learning from them. It is not about reaching the summit of every mountain, but about finding the strength to climb, even when the path is steep. As the last whispers of the gods fade into the quiet of the night, we leave this place behind, quietly, gently, as the world drifts back to sleep. The myths of ancient Greece, though distant in time, continue to echo through our lives, reminding us that we are part of a greater story, a story that is ever unfolding, ever changing, and ever ours to shape. Good night, dear listener. May your journey, like Odysseus's, be filled with wisdom, courage, and the understanding that no matter the trials you face, you're never alone on your path. Sleep well, knowing that the lessons of the past are always with you, guiding you toward the future.